Exactly. So rather than talking about, well, what the fudge is going on with the 407 visas, let's flip this around and
Yeah.
talk about what is an ideal 407 candidate. We certainly don't want people to shy away from it, but we've got a couple of tips to ensure that you are able to meet the test. So, what you want to do is to get from point A to point B, but you've got the basic qualifications and skills to do your role. So, it's very important to identify what it is that you're actually trying to achieve with the training visa.
Yeah.
Skills gap really is the purpose of the training visa.
Yeah.
It's probably the most important point.
All right, so I think we had a very good conversation about 407 visas and why they were failing and what was going on because the Department of Affairs have been refusing a lot of these visas. And now we want to cover how to ensure that a training visa is well applied for to ensure that being approved.
Exactly. So rather than talking about, well, what the fudge is going on with the 407 visas, let's flip this around and
Yeah.
talk about what is an ideal 407 candidate. And we've got a couple of ideas that we want to give to you so that you know whether you are the right candidate to apply for this particular visa, because it is a good visa. It serves such a great purpose, and we certainly don't want people to shy away from it, but we've got a couple of tips to ensure that you are able to meet the test. So stick till the end to find out what those are.
So I think you said it very well, Ross. Like this is actually a great visa. It is a visa that is needed, and in fact, it is out there because the department understand that a lot of people may utilize a training plan and this program to achieve, like
100%.
enhancing
Yeah.
those skills. So I think the first thing is going to actually identify the skill gap. So
Yes.
how do we ensure that the applicant needs this push in this environment to achieve a better level in their skills? So how do you identify the skill
And
gap?
what I'm going to do to answer your questions, I'm going to use a few analogies just so that our viewers can also relate. Now, what exactly is a skills gap? It's really important to keep in mind that the training visas are designed for individuals who know how to perform their role. So a skills gap would be, let's say, if you are a marketing specialist and there is a particular form of marketing, so it could be digital marketing, or web marketing that you need to do. So that's the skills gap that you identify. So what you want to do is to get from point A to point B, but you've got the basic qualifications and skills to do your role. So it's very important to identify what it is that you're actually trying to achieve with the training visa.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just put a marketing specialist on the training visa without identifying that skills gap, it's not really appropriate, and that's where refusals tend to happen.
Yeah.
So you need to actually identify the purpose. So skills gap really is the purpose of the training visa.
Yeah.
It's probably the most important point.
So is it like for example, using that occupation? So a marketing specialist, they already know how to do marketing,
Yes.
but they're identifying that within the marketing, they can do something related to web design marketing or
Yeah,
so
100%.
that's the skill gap. It's in there, and then as
Exactly.
soon as you identify this, then you ensure.
100%. And also skills gap may also arise due to external environmental factors. So say, for example, the way that marketing is involved today or evolves today, it's different. So maybe there's a new trend that has happened, and now that there's now a skills gap. So someone who was good at their job, say 2 years ago, there is a bit of a shortfall in terms of how things are done in today. So that's where the skill gap may happen.
Yeah, that's really important for us. Now, I want to speak about, where do we draw the line in between identifying a skill gap and someone that is actually overqualified? Because I think this is where the department is being really, really harsh. When
Yeah.
people haven't been able to identify that, or address a skill gap, but they go overboard and say, hey, actually this person has this number of experience, however they lack this a skill gap, and actually that's not seen like a skill gap, but rather like, oh, actually this person is overqualified or they know already what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's interesting. I was just listening to that question, and an example that popped into my head. There was a training visa that I did ages ago for a beekeeper, and to be honest, we didn't proceed with the application just because the applicant was overly qualified. They were a beekeeper for a number of years, and there was nothing further that they could learn in relation to beekeeping. Now, I'm not overly simplifying the beekeeping process, but it's just that particular person.
Yeah.
They've had the qualifications, they've had the skills. There was nothing further they could learn, so we had to put them on the sponsored visa instead.
Yeah.
So that's a classic example of where, if you're not, if you're good at your occupation and there's no sort of areas that you can elaborate on in terms of your skills and enhancing it, then that's how you sort of answer the question as to whether or not the 407 visa is for you.
Yeah, yeah. Which brings us to the next point. Because the training visa is going to identify someone that already knows what they're doing. So the training visa is actually for people that have already the skills.
Correct.
I mean, we have two streams, obviously, the enhancing skill or the registration, which we're going to speak about later. But the persons actually, they know what to do already. They possess the set of skills, and then there is a gap.
Yeah,
which you
exactly.
have to identify, but also be careful and identify whether the person already is qualified, not to come across the department like being overqualified.
And that's where that fine red line is, I suppose. If you've already got the skills, if there's nothing further that the role requires you to do, then there is no skill gap. You are not necessarily overqualified. You're just not a suitable candidate for the 407 visa. So it is important and we'll talk about the training plan shortly, there needs to be progression in terms of what happens. Excellent segue. Progression.
Yes. So there must be a progression. It has to make sense. So how to elaborate a good training plan that is going to demonstrate that the person is coming from having these skills, having identified the skill gap, but now making it logical and in a way that progresses. Give us an example. Let's talk about this with a clear example.
Okay. Well, the most common example or the most common question that I get asked is, can I use the same training plan for multiple applicants? And
that's very good.
Yeah, and the answer is no. The reason being is because if that was the case, it would show that everyone is basically operating at the same level, which is not the case.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So in terms of the career progression, what's important is that the training plan is unique to your particular needs, and it needs to have a sense of purpose. So basically you get from point A to point B, but if you're just sort of in the stationary line, then there is no career progression. So again, you don't qualify for a training visa.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to bear in mind in this point is that if we're going to speak about someone, let's say a chef, that already have the set of skills and they want to progress into and enhance, their skills. A training plan that is tailored to this specific client may not necessarily be for an entire year or for 2 years. It may be for 6 months, maybe even be for 3 months or shorter. Because the idea is to make sense of what they're saying.
Yeah, and that's actually such a good point as well. The training visa, yes, it can be granted for 2 years, but the reality is that the training program or the career progression may not necessarily need to last for 2 years. I suppose another analogy to throw in there, if someone gets put on a promotional development plan, they don't stay on it for 2 years. It's generally a couple of months, and then you get the promotion, assuming that you meet all of your goals. So you sort of need to look at it from that point of view.
Yeah, and that's really important because what we've seen, Ross, in several refusals that we have been referred to, is you don't want to give the sense that you want the person to keep a working position, like a job.
Exactly.
The department is addressing this very clearly, like, hey, the intention of a training visa is not to keep job in Australia.
Yeah, it's valid for 2 years, or it's accessible for 2 years. But just because something's accessible for 2 years doesn't mean it should be accessed for
Yeah.
2 years.
So the key point here is that it has to make sense. It have to demonstrate progression.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's going to be different each time.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, this one's easy.
Yeah. So in saying this, I think it's worth speaking about those occupations that need a registration. So a training visa is perfect for this kind of
Yeah,
situations.
with registration, we normally don't find many sort of setbacks because it's quite obvious. So, for example, if you're a health practitioner in Australia, you must have registration, and you go from provisional registration to full registration. So in these circumstances, a training visa would be perfect. So it has nothing to do with how much experience you've got. It's got everything to do with the fact that in order for you to work autonomously, you need that registration. And again, what's really important is that registration requirements for each occupations vary. So some you might have to do additional work placement. With others, you might have to do an exam or a test or some sort of assignment. But yes, it is different for each occupation. So if registration is required, it's not about the career progression, it's actually about the ability to be able to start your career. So it's a little bit different in that regard.
All right, Ross. So speaking now more in detail about the training plan, I think it would be worth to do it with real examples, because a training plan has to be specific, has to address the skills that are going to be acquired by this applicant. So I wanna use this example of a carpenter that is working now in doing doors with a Japanese style. I think there is a lot of room here to demonstrate that there is a skill gap, and that this person can enhance her skill to create these sort of doors.
And that's actually a perfect example of a practical training plan. So how would you structure that? Now, obviously, the carpenter here has the relevant carpentry skills, but you would be focusing more on the specific Japanese style. So there might be particular ways to paint the doors, particular way to finish these doors, and the training plan, it doesn't. What's really important to keep in mind is that the training plan doesn't need to become more difficult, but it needs to make sense.
Yeah.
So going back to this carpenter, so if they are designing Japanese style doors and floors and other sort of furniture, there needs to be a start and a finish. So the training plan needs to take that into consideration. So it's not so much about making it more difficult with each month, but it's about making sure that there is that cohesion and progression. And I think the other important element about training plan is also including a bit of an objective. So in this particular case would be to become a skilled carpenter in Japanese style doors.
Yeah, absolutely. So identify that, make it logical, reflect the progression, and I think a visa could be approved under this training plan.
100%.
Yeah. So another element about the training visa is there must be a supervisor or someone with a higher level of skills than the trainee.
Yeah. So when it comes to picking a supervisor, what's really important to keep in mind, it doesn't have to be a learning and development manager or a training manager. What you're looking at is someone who's gone through the training plan themselves. So what I mean by that is that, let's say if you've got 10 modules in the training plan, whoever is the supervisor, they need to understand what those modules are. Because you're not going to be able to enforce a particular training program if you don't know what those modules are, and you also need to be available in order to provide that support. We're going to keep in mind it's on the job training, so whoever is supervising it needs to understand what that on the job training is.
So I think that if we keep in mind all these aspects, we can ensure that the training plan, the training visa is well structured and ensure an approval.
100%. Making sure that all of these points are followed, and if you have any other questions that you want us to answer, comment your questions below on the training visas, and we'll cover that in our subsequent episodes. I feel like training visas is definitely not going to go away anytime soon.